This scene shall follow a scene in which all 5 of the relevant characters board the interstellar cruiser Kalos Kagathos. They are all going to Mars with the android Unigen to take part in Operation Tandem Silhouette. It begins. Jomai didn't know where to go from here. He figured he'd said enough. "It was my father," she said. Jomai nodded. "He was killed all those years ago. In the fall of New Sendai." Jomai turned towards her. "I'm so sorry, I had no idea." "It's okay, there's no way you could have known. I haven't told anyone, other than my aunt back in Sapporo." He put his hand to his cheek, thinking. Amiya could tell what he was thinking. "And this means that Mars is originally my home. But, I've never met anyone in the first district who was born on Mars before the fall. Those were all refugees, aren't they?" The outer district is a catch-all term for the restricted zones that were laid throughout the outer suburbs of every city worth its salt in Neo-Japan. These were city-sized bins for refugees, criminals, addicts, loan defaulters, the unemployed, anyone who missed more than a few beats on keeping up with their social credit score. "Well, now you have." Jomai swung his chin up in surprise. "You're a refugee from the fall?" Amiya nodded placidly. "Well, how did you get here then? How did you?" "It was Oshiro. He's the one who got me here. But I thought if you were stuck in the outer districts, that was it." "That's how I thought it was too, until a few months ago. But it's a long story." A look of revulsion ripped across Jomai's face. "A few months? You aren't from the outer district, are you?" Amiya paused for a moment. Did she want to keep going? Did she want to answer him? Would it make it any easier or make it worse for her to tell him everything? She didn't know. But she figured that if this mission was as dangerous as Oshiro made it out to be, perhaps she should get these secrets off her chest anyway. Kotome has known them for so long, keeping them locked away in her chest of the unsaid, they've grown stale in their inexorable immutability, stuck in the unchanging past. If Amiya were to die, the tapestry of her life would fade away into the wind of Kotome's inevitable old age. Now is the time to tell her story. To hell with Jomai's prejudice. She burst into tears. "You have no idea what it's like out there. We have to shoulder the burdens of history. Nothing I have done in my life, nothing my aunt did, none of the choices my friends have made has anything to do with why they're there. We were born into it, just like you were born into." She looked at the black line streaking down his upper arm, along a vein that traveled in a straight line down the side of his bicep. "Whatever it is that you are." Jomai's face contorted into a frown. "Please." She continued, unfazed. "We're driftwood floating down life's tributaries. Some go left, and some go right. And from there, only the eternal present can tell. But as fate would have it, I was born on Mars and you were born in a weapons lab buried somewhere in the pits of Nagorsko." Amiya took a second to look at Jomai. He was standing by the bay window, his face turned outwards towards the distant profile of Mars, resting placidly on an invisible canopy of the sun's gravity. It was suspended there, with an edge of darkness slowly drifting across its surface. It would be nighttime soon in New Sendai. "I'm not some freak you can dismiss on a whim like that. I'm an elite soldier, Amiya. The elite soldier." He leaned against the wall and rubbed his thumb and forefinger together. The red hexagonal versus insignia patch on his sleeve was shining like a lamp, reflecting the piercing glow of the cabin lights. "This life was chosen for me, but that's because I have what it takes. I was born to do this. And all of us around here have given everything we have to protect our way of life. To protect the very existence of the human race. I'm not a piece of driftwood floating down a drainage canal. If that's how you see yourself, well, maybe that's an outer district thing, but in this unit we know our esteemed place in society. And that's to uphold our security." Amiya stood up and walked over next to him, and looked out of the window. She pointed to Mars with just the tip of her finger. "I haven't opened the recall pod and I don't want to. But my aunt, she's seen it. She had to identify him for the police report. It was all so fast. The insurgents painted my father as a target. They knew who he was. They knew what he was doing. It was all an elaborate operation. Jomai looked at her inquisitively. He thought about other recall pods he's had to open in the past, after every battle, sometimes witnessing the deaths of his friends. The technology recreates entire events which can be viewed from all angles, slowed down, paused, and sped up. This allows Jomai to analyze failures, so that he may prevent further loss of life in future engagements. My father was Kotano Misaki, the man who first bridged the gap between the analog and artificial minds. He was behind Project Revenant? The underlying technology, yes. Why did you keep this from me? It's not exactly something I want to print on a billboard and hang on my forehead, you know? I still think it's important. Amiya waited for a moment, tuning her ears to the cool sound of processed air swinging through the ventilation system. I know that he was an important figure because of his work, but that also made him highly sought after by those on the other side. The city was engulfed in chaos when it happened. Defense forces were overrun everywhere. I think they planned it this way. They knew my father's security would be compromised. That's terrible. My father was a smart man, and he saw what was coming. From the very start of the battle, he chose to protect his family first and foremost. So what did he do? He took me down to the starport and pulled some strings to get me on board. When they broke into our apartment, my father knew what was about to happen. In the haste of the moment, he whisked me away to the balcony and handed me off to their downstairs neighbors. Somehow he got a message to my aunt because she quickly arrived to spirit me away. He was a hero. The only reason why I became a refugee in the first place was because of the failing bureaucracy on Mars at the time. With my father compromised and nobody to sponsor my departure flight back to Earth, my aunt was forced to broker a deal with a smuggler that very same day. He tossed me onto a mineral frigate among the desperate throng of stowaways, and so began the rest of my life. That's crazy. When I arrived on Earth, I had no legal status because I had no evidence of a valid trip across the solar system. I was forced to enter as a refugee, and because our laws are the way they are, I will always be one. There's no other way? Well, not unless I finish this contract. Jomai tapped his chin. So that's where Oshiro comes in. He offered premier citizenship to me in exchange for my service on this one, single campaign. Jomai rolled these revelations around in his mind. Then this is quite the homecoming for you. Amiya nodded in silence. I have to get some rest before that dropship training we've got in the morning. Of course, Amiya was staring aimlessly out of the bay window. Don't forget to get some sleep too, they'll come down hard on anyone dozing off tomorrow. I will, she said, without averting her gaze. Jomai quietly left the room, which left Amiya suddenly engulfed in a pocket of nagging loneliness. This surprised her, as she'd been seeking some alone time since the day started. She turned and sat down once again, before reaching into her vest pocket and pulling out an old photograph. I look at an image of you now and I see a face, but I see a man I don't know. I don't know what you sounded like, or how your laughter felt. Were you a good man? I think so, you did save me after all. Amiya locked her eyes on the old photo until her eyes went crossed in exhaustion. The two blurred ghosts of her father looked back at her. The mildly upturned corners of his mouth, his coy smile, it was her only reminder that he ever loved her. And by now, that was all she had left.